against 2,000. But Franks had learned a vital lesson from Operation Desert Storm. When the Allied attack in 1991 halted after liberating Kuwait and left Saddam still in power in Iraq, many commentators suggested that it was a political decision. Others disagree, laying the blame on one of the inherent weak spots in the Blitzkrieg battle plan: logistics.
The reason that the coalition attack stopped was quite simply logistics, that the tanks had run out of fuel and the air forces had run out of precision-guided munitions.
Whether the decision to stop during Desert Storm was due to politics or logistics, or a combination of both, an important lesson in armored warfare was learned by the U.S. battle planners.
Modern main battle tanks, tanks like the M1 and the Challenger, have such a voracious appetite for fuel that you can't use that many of them and still move quickly. The old marriage of armor and operational mobility that we saw during World War II has ended. And we now have to make trade-offs between combat power, the ability to fight, and operational mobility, the ability to move large distances over land.
To get around the logistic problem, Franks's version of the Blitzkrieg battle plan was based deliberately on using a far smaller force than in Desert Storm, but much more swiftly and aggressively. Yet the press and military pundits not only expressed concern that the number of coalition troops deployed for Iraqi freedom was much smaller than in Desert Storm, but that the weapons available, in apparently far smaller numbers, looked much the same. The M1A Abrams tank, the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, the Paladin self-propelled gun. But what few laymen appreciated was the quantum leap in technological sophistication over the previous decade. GPS, the global positioning system, was now an integral part of most aerial weapon systems. During Desert Storm, only 10% of the weaponry had been precision-guided, largely by laser designators. Now at least half was. And unmanned aerial vehicles and aerial command posts speeded up the gathering of information and its assessment and presentation to commanders. The U.S. battle planners had also studied their much larger opponent. To an inexperienced eye, it still seemed a formidable force. But in reality, it was a pale shadow of even its 1992 strength. After studying intelligence reports on their opponent, Franks's planners are confident that their technological superiority will give them the overwhelming force that their plan requires. They note that there are few Iraqi units close to the Kuwait border, where their initial breakthrough will occur. The Iraqi battle plan seems to be to allow the Americans deep into their country and then try to bog them down. So the Blitzkrieg battle plan, which Franks and his team come up with, relies on unprecedented speed. The U.S. 3rd Mechanized Infantry Division, with 270 Abrams main battle tanks, will head up to the west of the Euphrates, moving as fast as possible and bypassing the major towns. Aiming at the gap around Karbala, between the Euphrates and Lake Bar, less than 40 miles from Baghdad. From here, it will attack from the west. Behind it, a massive supply column will be guarded by units from the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions. These will also eliminate opposition left behind by the main thrust. The 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, the MEF, with 120 Abrams, will cross the Euphrates at the first possible place, Nasiriyah, which is also the first potential choke point. It will then advance in 2 columns, towards Diwaniyah and Kut, so as to keep the Iraqis guessing as to whether the other main thrust towards Baghdad will come from the south or east. Task Force Tarawa will follow up the MEF to guard its supply routes and eliminate opposition. The British will deal with Iraq's second city, Basra, in the south. The success of the battle plan depends on one crucial principle: reach Baghdad as fast as possible.
No successful military plan is ever made in a vacuum, and certainly Tommy Franks was a great student. He's a great student of military history, and he developed a plan that certainly the great military commanders in history would have understood: Hannibal, Julius Caesar, whomever. It was very much, therefore, a plan that Tommy Franks said was Blitzkrieg with high-tech knobs on. The movement, the speed, the psychological impact was something that throughout history commanders had tried to achieve. Perhaps what they wouldn't have understood is the accuracy, the speed, the precision of everything that the commanders could do by 2003. But the basic plan was as old as time.
Now, the time has come for both breakthrough plans to be put to the test. For both the Germans and the coalition forces, the theoretical part of the battle planning is at an end. The reality of the breakthrough stage, the first direct contact with the enemy, is upon them. May 10th, 1940. The Germans execute their battle plan for Blitzkrieg. Army Group B thrusts into Holland and northern Belgium, luring the Allies forward. Further south, and almost unnoticed at first, the infantry, artillery, and combat engineers of Army Group A begin to punch through weak Allied forces, screening the Ardennes. Behind them come the panzers. Supported by Stukas, they get through the hills and woods of the Ardennes, cross the French border, and reach the River Meuse in just 3 days. Here, the French must stop them. It's the last natural defense line before the wide open plains of northern France, which reach all the way to the English Channel. But the Allied generals are focused on the threat further north. The low-grade troops defending the Meuse are given little support, and swiftly the German assault engineers get across to establish 3 bridgeheads. Soon the panzers are crossing. The Germans have achieved their breakthrough. They are now behind the main Allied armies with a virtually clear run all the way to the coast. March 20th, 2003. Coalition ground and air elements unleash their modern Blitzkrieg. Airstrikes go into Baghdad. Apache helicopters cross the Kuwait-Iraq border to destroy Iraqi observation posts. Then artillery systems open up. By daybreak, the lead units of Frank's Blitzkrieg battle plan have crossed the Iraqi border and begun their race for Baghdad. The tanks of 3rd Infantry head northwest of the Euphrates. One brigade swings north to seize a crossing over the Euphrates west of Nasiriyah, the first potential choke point. The other 2 race north along dirt tracks and through the desert towards Samawa and Najaf, aiming for the Karbala Gap, the final choke point before Baghdad. The 1st Marine Division starts by striking north alongside the British 7th Armored Brigade towards the vital oil fields at Ramallah. These are swiftly captured, with only 7 out of 1,000 sabotaged. The Iraqi 51st Division collapses and surrenders. As anticipated, the breakthrough phase of the coalition Blitzkrieg battle plan is an immediate success. The few Iraqi forces anywhere near the border are swiftly brushed aside or disappear. The Marines then turn north towards the crossing point west of Nasiriyah, while the British continue on to capture Basra. Within the first few hours, the coalition forces have achieved what the Germans needed 3 days to accomplish: a breakthrough with wide open spaces ahead of them towards their main goal. For both armies, the next phase of the Blitzkrieg battle plan: strike deep is crucial. It's now that they will be at their most vulnerable. France, May 1940. The Allied commanders seem utterly unable to understand what is happening to them. But they're not the only ones taken by surprise.
The Germans are also surprised by the initial success of their Blitzkrieg battle plan. But rather than either sitting on their laurels or trying to figure out what was going on, they simply pushed forward. They had this bias for action, this desire to push forward whenever they could. And so they decided to finish the job and then at leisure figure out what had gone wrong and what had gone right.
Once they were across the Meuse, the German panzer commanders, like Heinz Guderian, allowed nothing to stop them, not even Hitler. Within 8 more days, they had reached the coast of the English Channel, having traveled over 200 miles. With the panzers of Army Group A rampaging behind them, and German Army Group B pushing from the north, the Allies fall back, caught by a pincer movement, to Dunkirk. But the deep strike phase was not totally straightforward.
The Germans had trained a wild animal that they eventually let off the leash through the Ardennes in the spring of 1940. The difficulty was that the owner therefore lost control as soon as they let that dog off the leash. If you actually have a commander that is going to be bold, courageous and exploit opportunities, one day he's going to scare that owner, he's going to scare his headquarters.
So what did scare the owner? The first danger in the Blitzkrieg battle plan is that of counterattack. The longer and thinner the German line of advance became, the greater the exposure to counterattack, especially on weak flanks. In their drive west, the panzers came under 2 counterattacks, which might have changed the course of the battle. 3 days after the breakout from the Meuse bridgeheads, a French armored division attacked the dangerously exposed south flank. The attack was not properly supported and soon ground to a halt. But it so frightened Hitler and the German High Command that the panzer thrust was ordered to stop and wait for the infantry. The panzers did not stop.
Heinz Guderian wanted to move as quickly as possible, snapping at the backside of the retreating French and retreating British. Hitler, the owner back at headquarters, wanted to haul him back in, was calling him, was whistling for him, but he wasn't listening.
Then, 2 days later, near Arras, a British tank brigade tried to cut through the right flank. For a short time, it looked as if the right flank panzer division might be halted. But German artillery was rushed up, and this threw the